Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Lessons That Last podcast. We're so glad you're back. I'm Julie Hassan, professor, educational researcher, and with me is my shiny New Year's co-host,
Laura Estes Swilly. I am an English teacher and all the things that implies. And friends, come with us. Come sit down, bring a friend, and join us for the first episode of our second season.
Yeah, you can always sit with us.
Yes.
We're going to talk teaching and New Year's goals and all the things on the pod today. So, Laura, this is our first episode of Season 2. It is January 2024. Did you set any New Year's resolutions or goals?
So I am anti-resolution, and I actually bring this into my classroom every year. We talked this year specifically about how you make a resolution and you have every intention of doing it. And you're very conscious about like SMART goals. I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week. And the first week that you don't make that 3 days, how do you feel? And the kids were like, oh, you're a failure. And exactly. So why would we plan something that at some point in the year, we're going to drop and we're going to consider ourselves a failure? And then what most of us do, human nature, we quit. Mm-hmm. So that 2 times or that 1 time wasn't enough. I failed, I quit. And so I talked to them about the one word, the one thing you can be mindful of that will change or enhance your life in some way for the entire year. And that's a lot of pressure, right? On the first day back to school after New Year's, pick one word to carry you through the year that will make a difference in your life. And as they walked in, I gave everyone a Post-it. Each of my preps, I have 3 different preps. Each one had a different color, so they would know where to see theirs. They had to write their word on the Post-it. We put them on the bulletin board. I glued them down because, Post-its don't really stick. And there they are, right front and center when you walk in the door. There's a touchstone. There's a reminder that you want to change or improve or enhance something that's going to make a difference.
Oh, I love the one word. I have a hard time picking the one word. Sometimes for me, it's like a one phrase or a one sentence.
I always am happy to pick one word. I don't know. It just comes easily to me. And I think I just distill it. One year it was due. It was one of the first years post-pandemic where everything was opening back again. And we had kind of gotten used to just not doing anything and just being at home because it's all you were allowed to do. And I found that I lost the thread of like going out into the world and being a part of things. And so my word was due. And I knew that meant take the opportunities. So my word this year is productive. And my students thought that was strange because they find me to be highly productive. They can't believe all the things that I'm doing all the time, but I know all of the things I'm not doing. And I know there's more that I want to do. And if I can be mindful of being productive, I actually will start doing them.
I love that. I always think of you as a more glamorous, glittery, romantic word, but productive is a good word for all of us.
Yeah.
All the time. Our time is our most precious resource. And if we can manage it well and make the most of it, that certainly helps us have a better year.
Well, yeah. And you can't be glamorous and glittery if you're not strong underneath, right? The work has to go into it. So I can't shine unless I'm productive. So for me, I'm trying to do that background hardcore work for the coming year. And the beautiful thing is there's no failure because I didn't resolve. I said, this is going to be my focus. And what happens when you lose focus? You refocus, you just kind of shift your gaze. And so we're going to do that on like a mental and emotional level. And I think it's really a great idea. I heard it on a podcast years ago, and my kids seem to really take to it too.
Oh, I love that. I see a bunch of educators on Twitter talking about their one word for the year, and there's so many inspiring words, and there's always such a good reason for the word they chose. So I love your word. I'm with you on the resolutions. So a few years ago, I realized that I was setting goals and resolutions for the new year based on this sort of limiting belief that there's something wrong with me or missing. I was going to set a resolution to fix something that wasn't right with me.
Right.
And at some point, I think it occurred to me how unloving and what a lack of self-compassion that is. And so now I set a goal like you, but I'm doing 12-week goals, quarterly goals, because I need a little sense of urgency. If I think I have a year, I'll start worrying about it in October. So I'm doing 12-week goals, but I'm making sure I set the goals out of self-love and not self-loathing.
Nice.
So if there's a goal to, like for me, it's always exercise more often, not because I need to lose weight or there's something wrong with my body or whatever, because I love myself enough that I want to be energetic and healthy and be able to do all the things I love to do. So I'm trying to shift that thinking from I'm fixing something to I'm loving myself enough to want something even better.
Yes.
That's kind of the way I'm going this year with my 12
I love that. Goals. And with the one word, that will fold into the goals that we set for ourselves, that are not resolutions, but actual actionable goals. And I can't get anything done if I'm not productive. And you know me, like I can get lost and live in my head for a really long time. And I can tell a lot of stories in my head that never make it to paper. And I need to be more productive to make those things real and tangible because I owe it to myself because it's what I want to do.
I love that. And this story, I think, is certainly a little bit about stretching and a goal and in some ways productivity, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When you texted me and said, I want to pick the story, let's start with Wyatt and Miss Dell, I was like, whoa, you've never like come out of left field and said, I want to do this story. So I knew it was really important to you. What prompted this, Julie?
Speaking of productive, or I should say unproductive, which is what holiday break is for, right? Winter break is for. There are 2 movies I watch every winter break, and I have for a really long time. And I'm not a big TV watcher or movie watcher, but before Christmas, we celebrate Christmas. So before Christmas, I will watch Love Actually every single year because Love Actually just makes me happy. It's so sweet. And I love Hugh Grant, that crabby little British guy that he is. So Love Actually is my pre-Christmas movie. And before New Year's, I will watch that movie New Year's Eve, which is in some ways similar. So it's all of these different plots that are webbed together by certain characters in common. New Year's Eve has everybody in it. Ashton Kutcher, Michelle Pfeiffer, Hilary Swank, Robert De Niro, like Sarah Jessica Parker. I couldn't even name them all. But John Bon Jovi, who was our high school love, is in this movie. And he sings this song that Wyatt talks about in this story. So when I heard that song in the movie again, and now our book is out this year, I had to go grab it and read that story again. And I made myself a note. Let's start season 2 with this. So thank you for indulging me in this one.
Love it. Anytime. It's a beautiful story. I remember, obviously, there's so many stories, and it's kind of hard to believe that I would remember reading them for the first time. But I do, because they always have this emotional effect. I like, they take a toll from me. And this one, I remember really, really needing to sit with just so I could get past my feelings to get to the productive part of what I was trying to do with it. Because it's just everything you want to be as a teacher.
Yeah. So beautiful. So, Laura, will you read Wyatt's story about Miss Dell for us?
I will. And, if I cry a little, we'll be all right with that. By the time I got to high school, I had been playing piano for several years, but I was pretty green as a vocalist. My chorus teacher, Miss Dell, was choosing pieces for our spring recital. She asked me to perform a new song by John Hyatt called Have a Little Faith in Me. She wanted me to sing it as a solo at the piano. I was completely intimidated by the song. After a few weeks of practice, I played and sang it for Miss Dell. It sounded awful, but she was not deterred. She just kept reassuring me that I would get it. Armed with her feedback, I continued to practice, but I had little belief that I would be ready for the recital. Miss Dell always challenged us to think about the emotion behind the songs we sang. She told us that to interpret a song well, we needed to feel it rather than just worry about the technical side of our performance. As I practiced, I tried to channel my deep appreciation for the people in my life who believed in me, my parents, my friends, and teachers like Miss Dell. When I performed the song in the spring recital, it was far from technically perfect, but it sounded pretty good. The audience responded to it, and Miss Dell cried. That song has come to mean more to me as I've grown older. It was lost on me at the time that Miss Dell was a living embodiment of that song. She had more than a little faith in me, and I will always be grateful for her.
Oh, Miss Dell, and this song, I love this song. And I'm thinking John Hyatt wrote the song and sings the song beautifully, but I want to say Joe Cocker does a version of this song that is so emotional and raw as Joe Cocker is. And and then the Bon Jovi song, of course, is lovely and smooth like Bon Jovi.
I love that Mrs. Dell challenged them to think about the emotions behind the songs, that in order to interpret it, they needed to feel it. And that's art. And so she was able to sort of tap into the art inside them rather than just the singer, because performers like to perform, but what are you performing? And she was able to really teach them something, I think, vital.
Yes. In any performance, I was listening to someone who was talking about a storytelling competition. Brian has a coworker who is an amazing storyteller and has been since she was little and goes to these competitions. And I said, how do you tell the same story over and over again without getting tired of it? And she said, you have to feel the story every time you tell it. It makes me think of Miss Dell's advice. True for writers, I'm sure.
Yes.
That quote we love, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader.
You gave me a tote bag once that said that. And I think about it all the time. And sometimes when I'm writing, and I always kind of tease myself, or when I tell other people this, I'll be writing and I'm bringing myself to tears with my writing because it's so beautiful. And I'm joking, but I'm also not joking, because sometimes I'm composing something and I'm weeping, and I know I'm in the juice. I know I'm there because of the feeling that I'm having.
And we talk so often as educators about social emotional learning.
Yeah.
That comes out in these creative pursuits in singing and visual arts and writing. So if we really want to help kids with social emotional learning, it's things like this. How do you feel the song? How do you put emotion into your writing, into your art, into the story that you're telling?
Yes. Now, I have been for a week. We went back to school on the 8th, and I decided we're going to start with some poetry, because we're getting ready to read Hamlet in my honors classes. And that's always a struggle to read Shakespeare, and to sort of soften the soil. Let's read some poetry, write some poetry, and kind of get in that vibe. And the struggles my students have had trying to compose a poem. And I've given them a new opportunity every day. And it just really reminds me of how little we ask kids to think and feel versus like reply and regurgitate. And I hate to say that, but I notice it so much in my lower level kids. I think we're so worried about benchmarks that we forget, like, hey, let's have them do some thinking, some wild thinking, their own thinking, which their own thinking is usually not going to be associated with a benchmark skill, but that's okay. So trying to tap into the artistry within each person is a job. That's a big job.
Wow. And, even for graduate students, writing is such a challenge to get on the paper what you want to say and then to revise it until it says clearly what you were trying to say, and it says it in a way that uses the right words and an economy of words. And it just, I don't think my students go into graduate school realizing that the bulk of the writing they will do is revision and editing.
Yes. Because when your graduate students are educators and have been educators for a long time, usually, at least a substantial period of time. And when we teach writing in schools today, it's draft writing.
And it's a timed test, right?
You have 45 minutes and you have to draft it out. And so revision and editing and bringing something to a final product is not part of what's happening in a lot of classrooms across the country. Probably very few, because we're always in the time crunch. We're always worried about the benchmarks. We're training for the game day. And why waste our time on something that isn't part of the game?
Wow, but it's so much more important.
Oh, it's everything.
And it makes me think about Wyatt and Miss Dell, because somehow she got him to stretch beyond what he thought he could do.
Yes.
Which is what you're asking of your writers and what I'm asking of my grad students.
Yes.
To say, okay, you're going to be bad at it at first. It's going to be really uncomfortable and hard at first, and it's not going to be good. So how do we continue on through the messy part till it is something you're proud of at the end? So how do you do that with your students?
So for me, I don't know how other people do that with their students, but for me, in my classroom, we do a lot where I say, there's no rules to this. There's no wrong. You do your way. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how short it is, if it makes the point it needs to make. And that freaks them out. That's like too much freedom, because they want a formula so they can do it right. And what I'm trying to tell them is it will be right when it does the job and you do it your way. And so we have to break them of that. And that's hard. It's hard for me with seniors. I can't imagine how hard it is with graduate students who have been like doing what's required for so long.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So it's honestly too, it's time, Julie. You got to take the time and over. We are at the point now where someone says, how long should this be? Someone else in the room will say, there's no required length. She doesn't care how long it is, as long as it does the job. They know, but they still fall back and want a little bit of guideline.
Same with the grad students.
I know.
And I stopped for a while on many projects giving them a rubric.
Yes.
Because then they didn't really have to unpack and figure out how to approach it. They were just going through the components
Checklist
of the rubric. And even with a good, well-constructed rubric, it wasn't giving them that same kind of space.
No.
They weren't quite struggling enough to figure things out on their own, especially the doc students. And for them, I think the most helpful thing as emerging researchers is for me to say, as someone who's been doing research for a while, hey guys, here's what I've started working on. It has really got me tangled up and
Yes.
struggling.
Yes.
And this is why I'm struggling. And this is how long it's taking me. And this is how I'm working through it. Because I think we also have to model for
Yes.
them doing hard things ourselves and showing them that this is what artists and writers and researchers and singers do. We pick something hard and we struggle through it.
Absolutely. And that's the other piece, is the modeling. I'm sure that some of my students are tired of hearing about writing a book and what goes into writing a book. But I know that I'm asking them to do something really hard almost every day, just by writing, just by being themselves. So I'm modeling by doing what I ask them to do. If I ask you to do it, I'm going to do it. If I ask you to share yours, I'll share mine. And also, here's the long-term effect of that, and like talk to them about the book, show them the book that we just published, because Lessons That Last was a year-long work in progress, and they think everything should be done in 45 minutes. So you have to model that. And I think, especially for you teaching researchers, I'm not teaching writers. Very few of my kids want to be writers. So I'm teaching kids just, hey, let's expand the way you're thinking about this. But for your students, I would imagine you're a wonderful role model because you're in the trenches doing the same work.
And it is important for them to see us doing that. I have a friend who's a professor here at App. He doesn't teach in the summer. He's a learner in the summer. So every summer he picks something to try to, he won't master it. He doesn't say master, but to try to learn well enough in the summer. And it may be a foreign language. It may be an instrument. It may be a sport, because he wants to remember what it's like to be a learner and struggle. And I think, and he does a little blog. I mean, it's great. I think that's such a great model.
Yes.
To say, as a teacher, I'm going to spend these few months being a learner so that I can understand where my students are.
Yes. And I also, I mean, I'm not going to say that I necessarily do this on purpose. I let my imperfections be real. So I'm not like, oh, I just go ahead and throw caution to the wind. No, I am imperfect and I make mistakes, but I'm not afraid of that in public. There are things that I'm not good at, and that's transparent in my classroom. And I'm not obsessive about hiding that. So I think that a lot of us are, right? So here's the example. I was doing this weird thing with my AP students, and I made a graph on the board, basically. And so across the top were the numbers, and down the side were the teams, and they had to advance. I put their names at number 1. There was no place to start. Like, they didn't get on the board. We got to question 7 and realized that there was no 9. There just was no 9. When my second class came in, there was no place for them, and I had to add all of it. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm not good at this. My lowest level of intelligence is spatial. And if I'm doing something spatial, I am going to make a mistake. You wouldn't believe that it took me an hour to figure out how to arrange this room, but it did. And that's real. I'm going to keep working at it. And they're like, oh yeah, just draw a line here. And we figured it out together. But I think they need to see that we struggle with things, whatever they are. And if you are teaching something and you struggle with writing, because millions of people do, model that struggle. Let them see you struggle, and let them see you work, and let them see you grow. That is so important to them.
And it's a culture. And I know I have said this. I say this to my students probably until they're sick of hearing it. But I know I say it anytime I work with a school or with teachers. The culture in your classroom or school is revealed by what you celebrate and what you tolerate. But do you celebrate the top grade, the perfect paper, the final product, or do you celebrate the struggle?
Right.
And there's something about a culture where we celebrate the struggle And we're cheering for that one who's just trying so
Yes.
hard to get it.
It reminds me, you talked about this on the pod a long time ago, where you were in a school and you were taking pictures because there was a giant bulletin board in the hallway.
The home ec classroom.
Yes. And it was the failures, like, what did I learn? I shouldn't put so much baking soda, or too much chocolate is too much chocolate. That idea was so perfectly encapsulated in that bulletin board. I loved it so much. I took it to my principal. We need this. We need this. So we are not so isolated. And so we know that, because what do you do when you're talking to another teacher, especially from a different department or grade level, or you're in a meeting? You're not highlighting the times you fell on your face in the middle of a lesson, but what I learned from that fall on my face is a beautiful thing, because it does two things. It shares the lesson, and it shares, I'm struggling too. We all struggle.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of reading talking about teacher loneliness these couple of weeks back.
Yes.
In January. And I think that's one of the reasons we feel lonely, is because we think sometimes we're the only one struggling. And everybody else has teacher buddies and has it all worked out and is rocking it. And I'm alone in my struggle. So I love what you said. I think if we share our struggles a little more and we talk about what's hard about our work a little more, people will feel a little less lonely.
Absolutely. And if we go back to the magic of Miss Dell and her chorus classroom, she shared that struggle with Wyatt. She walked the struggle with him. He was not struggling alone in, his quiet misery, worried he wouldn't be good enough. She walked it right next to him. And so he wasn't isolated, and he felt like he could do it because she believed in him, and she's not a liar. So we need that in our collegiate relationships as well.
Yeah. And that's a great intention to carry into 2024.
Yes.
To share your struggles, to support kids through the struggles, and to celebrate that messy middle where the struggle is, when we're trying to learn something new, trying to accomplish something, achieve something, figure something out. So I have started, I think if I picked a word for this year, it would have to be consistent, because I'm working on doing a few things consistently. And one of them is journaling. So
Nice.
I have started morning journaling on what is my intention for this day, what actions align with that intention, how am I going to stay focused on what matters most? And then at the end of the day, like just 10 minutes in the evening, on what were the successes, what did I learn from the not so successful, and how can I now rest? Like put that aside, feel satisfied, and have a little peace and joy, and get ready for the next day. So if you, friends, are wanting to start a journaling practice, I have taken the 10-minute pause journal and put it in a free downloadable digital format, and we will link it here so you can have it. We'd love to share that with you.
And can I add?
Oh, please add.
I want to add, because I love that journal. Do this with other people, because then we can break that isolation. So then we can be real with, and you're going to choose colleagues you trust and who are on the similar path you're on. Come together with other teachers and share that. Talk about those intentions. Talk about the things that did or didn't go well and what you learned, because you then are building such a strong community with other teachers, and that's what we need.
Oh, well said. Perfect addition. And as we close out, friends, if you loved Wyatt's story like we do, remember that you can find that story in the Lessons That Last book. We'll drop a link to the book in the show notes as well. And if you're reading along at home, it is lesson 24 in the book. It's titled Keeping the Faith. So check out lesson 24, Wyatt's story in the Lessons That Last book. And remember, we have more than a little faith in you, education friends.
We do. Thank you for joining us, friends.
Have a great week.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you will subscribe to the Lessons That Last podcast wherever you listen. Give us a rating too, which will help other listeners find us. And don't forget to visit chalkandchances.com for more stories. You can also find more information on Julie's research in books. While you're there, take the quiz to find out what kind of memorable teacher you are. I took it and was surprised by what I found. I think you'll find good food for thought. Let us know about your quiz results. We hope you will meet us here each week and bring a friend to share the conversation.